In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the zero product property. And what that is basically when two things are multiplied together to equal zero, one of them, the only way for that to happen is one of them has to equal zero. So we're going to have that, but we're going to have equations. And so in general, to solve these types of equations we're going to see in a second, we're going to set each factor equal to zero and then solve. All right, so what does that mean? Let's take a look. So directions are going to say solve, and if we have x times y times z equals 0, here's the most basic version of this property. The only thing that's going to multiply three things together and get a 0 is if one of them is going to equal 0. So either x needs to equal 0, or y needs to equal 0, or z needs to equal 0. So one of them needs to be true, or both of them needs to be true, or all three of them needs to be true, but at minimal one needs to be true. So let's take a different look to this. If you have 3z times z plus 4 equal to 0, and this is really the look that you're shooting for. Anything that's going to have multiple pieces multiplied together equals 0. Even better that we already have them in a factored form. We're going to set each of our factors equal to 0 and then solve. So first one is 3z gets set equal to 0, and z plus 4 gets set equal to 0. So we'll solve this one by dividing by 3. And if we do that, we'll get z equal to 0. And then here, we're going to subtract 4 on both sides, and we'll get z equal to negative 4. Okay, and to make sure that it works, we could take these values and plug them in and see if it multiplies to 0. So if you plug in 0 for this, 3 times 0 is 0. It doesn't matter what the 0 does to this parenthesis because 0 times whatever is going to equal 0. If you plug in negative 4, it's going to make this factor 0. This factor is going to be negative 12, but negative 12 times 0 is still going to equal 0. All right. So let's see another one. So this one we're going to have two factors. X plus 5 times x minus 3 equal to 0. So it came from some sort of an equation that got factored into this. We're going to set each of our factors equal to 0 and solve. Okay, so the first one we're going to subtract 5 on both sides. The second one we're going to add 3 to both sides, and we're going to get x equals negative 5 and x equals 3. And again, we can check it by plugging it in, see if it works. Negative 5 is going to make this 0. Doesn't matter what it makes this. 0 times whatever is going to be 0. 3 plugged into this factor is going to equal 0. So 0 times whatever is going to equal 0. All right. So what if it is not in factored form? Okay. So we want number 4 to really look like number 2. So we're going to try and factor out a greatest common factor. So between these two factors, or these two terms, a 2x can be factored out. So if we factor a 2x out, that would leave us with a 2x plus 3 equal to 0, and we will set each factor equal to 0. So 2x is going to equal 0, and 2x plus 3 is going to equal 0. So from here we're going to solve by dividing by 2. So that'll get us an x equal to 0. And then the second equation, we're going to subtract 3. And that'll get us a 2x equals negative 3. Divide both sides by 2 to isolate the x. And x is going to equal negative 3 halves. All right. All right, one more. So another different look to it. So if you have 4x equals 8x squared. So very similar to the previous problem, except we want it to equal 0. So you have two options. You could take this 4x and bring it over to this side, or you could take the 8x squared and bring it over to this side. But this is going to be the leading coefficient. It's going to be the highest power. I would like to try and keep this positive, which is going to have a tendency to make the problem a little bit easier to deal with. So I'm going to bring the 4x over to this side. Now they're not like terms, so we can't put them together, but we can still just write them next to each other. 8x squared minus 4x. And then now it's identical to the previous problem. So what do they have in common? They have a 4x that we can factor out. And that'll leave us with a 2x minus 1. So 4x dividing into the 2x, or the 8x squared is going to leave us a 2x. 4x dividing into the 4x is going to leave us a 1. And then that still equals 0. And now we're going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. All right, so for the first one, we'll divide both sides by 4, and we'll get x is going to equal 0. And then the next one, we'll add 1 to both sides, which is going to get us 2x equal to 1. And then we'll divide both sides by 2. And that'll get us an x equal to 1/2. And if you don't feel okay with your answers, well, you should do it anyway, but plug 0 back into this, you're going to get 0 on both sides. If you plug a 1/2 into this, half of 4 is 2. If you plug it into this side, you're going to square the 1/2 and get a fourth. A fourth of 8 also equals 2. So you can check your answers as well. All right, and that was the zero product property.